Jeremy, told you I was going to mention your name up here beyond just announcing your conversion. But you've done more for this community than you might know. As we face the latest wave of anti-Semitism, your decision to join our community is as inspirational as it's uplifting. In the face of humanity's oldest hatred, you've embraced us, as you've embraced Kathy, with love. And thanks, Kathy, for bringing another one on the team. We appreciate it. Now, I wish I could tell you that you'd never have to face that ugly specter of Jew hatred, but you're too worldly, too well-informed, too astute to know otherwise. You know the truth. And the truth is that anti-Semitism, despite moments of glimmering hope, seems to endure. And when it surfaces, there's no question that it reveals the ugliest side of any society where it does surface. It is as old as the Greeks and the Romans. That's where Jews were singled out for retribution before and after their acts of resistance against those conquerors of the ancient land of Israel. Now, it was directed at the Jews as a national entity, but it expanded beyond that to Jews wherever they might find themselves living in the region. But precedents were set for acts that were to follow. With the rise of Christianity, Jew hatred took on new forms. There were views of Christian views called supersessionism and Christian superiority that led to the persecution of Jews as a religious entity, those who rejected Jesus. Ironically, though, Jews and Christians lived shoulder to shoulder in these societies, and despite the fact they depended upon each other to thrive, that delusional hatred and derision, it actually supplanted communal well-being. It destroyed the societies where people were living. An oppression of Jews lessened the quality of life for all, and yet it persisted. Under Islam at first, Jews fared better for a time. Though never fully equal in stature, Muslim rulers were well aware of what Jews brought to their societies. And so they granted a certain protected status. We were called dhimmis in the Muslim world, fellow people of the book. With the establishment of Israel, however, centuries and centuries of tolerance and a certain degree of mutual respect and mutual advancement quickly evaporated to a uniquely Muslim form of Jew hatred. Enter modernity and the Enlightenment. We hoped when it blossomed in Europe, that things would change. Ideologically, it promised an end to interreligious hatred. But it turns out it only provided the Jew haters with a new angle. The artificial construct of race, and make no mistakes, it is artificial, was now applied to the Jew. Jews were a race now. And so pseudoscience was used to justify the latest manifestation of this world's oldest loathing. And of course, it culminated in Hitler and with his collaborators. They brewed a deadly elixir of poisonous Jew hatred. And what they did is they reprehensibly combined Christian antipathy towards Jews as a religion with racial stereotypes out of the Enlightenment combined with modern technology. And that's what created a brutally efficient killing machine. If you're not watching the latest Ken Burns documentary called The U.S. and the Holocaust, I strongly recommend it. It's required history. So in America, ever the optimists, we held out hope that this country, despite some brief and frankly disillusioning dalliances with anti-Semitism, that in this country, of all places, we would see it diminished. And we've had a fairly good run, for most of my lifetime, in fact, which makes the last few years that much more disturbing. Because it seems, sadly, that even in this country, anti-Semitism is here to stay. It's the world's truly longest-lasting pandemic. But it never wins. It never beats us. It lays us low sometimes, but it never vanquishes us. In fact, it usually has the unintended opposite effect, because we are usually far stronger for having endured however long that anti-Semitism lasts. So we find ourselves at a strange time in history in this country. On one side, and we have to acknowledge this, we've never had such status, prominence, and power in a country ever. Jews are at the highest levels of government. We're running universities. We celebrate endowed chairs in Israel and Jewish studies at our nation's most prestigious universities and even some of the lesser universities throughout the country. We are affluent. We're well established. We're educated. We have influence in all sectors of society. And of course, we have Israel, one of the world's most powerful nations. We can't forget that. So no flyers on front lawns, no banners over freeways, no anti-Israel resolutions at universities, no words of hate on social media, not even occasional violence is going to change that. We will endure, and we will endure with pride and strength. But these past years have taught us that we can't become complacent, that our times will always require vigilance and effective strategies and meaningful counterpunches. Yossi Klein Halevi is a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Israel. It's a progressive organization founded by modern Orthodox Jews, filled with Jews from all flavors, and I should add, newly brought on Arab fellows from the land of Israel. It's one of Israel's most influential think tanks and institutions of transformational learning. So Yossi Klein Halevi suggested 4 responses to anti-Semitism that he says we could learn from the way Jeremy Corbyn was overcome in England. First, he said, define the threat, regardless of its ideological source. And that's important, regardless of its ideological source. Whether it's the veiled anti-Semitism of anti-Israel resolutions at universities, or analogous correspondences by elected officials, or the vehemently ugly utterings of the likes of Farrakhan, or the dog-whistling anti-Semitism of Donald Trump, who tells the Jews to get their act together before it's too late. We know what that is. Or the insane rantings of Kanye West, a white supremacist in black skin, who is legitimized with airtime on Fox News in front of Tucker Carlson. Let's recognize that for what it is. Or the Jewish space lasers of Marjorie Taylor Greene, or the demonization of George Soros as the classic international Jew. So regardless of its source, anti-Semitism must be called out. Second, unite the Jewish community. Now we know, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. It's not easy. It will always be our defining characteristic. But when the margins of our rejection go beyond the far-right extremism of Jewish racism or the far-left extremism of anti-Zionists, and they go to anyone who doesn't agree with my position, they're off the pale, they're not part of my community, well then we're far weaker when we stand against anti-Semitism. Third, says Klein Halevi, reach out to non-Jewish allies. Now, cultivating allies takes time. It takes patience, and there will be setbacks and frustrations. But it requires us to speak up when Black or Asian or Latino Americans experience racism, like we recently saw in our city council. We do it first because it's the right thing to do, but secondly because when we need them, we hope that we can count on them to speak up for us because we've spoken up for them. Finally, maintain optimism and faith. That's perhaps the best advice of all. This wave of anti-Semitism is bad, but the sky is not yet falling, and we need to recognize that. And we have to respond, we surely do. And we must be strategic as we manage this deeply unfortunate and painful wave. But the anti-Semites don't get to dictate how we live. Our Judaism can't be solely based on a response to them. And that's where, honestly, places like WISE come in. Because every day here, we fight for the Jewish future. We educate proud Jewish kids. We study with ever-evolving Jewish adults. We embrace each other in sorrow and in joy. And so if you are not supporting a Jewish communal institution, but instead you're wringing your hands in anxiety over rising anti-Semitism, you are failing in that last step. If we don't support Jewish institutions, we are not pushing back against anti-Semitism, because our Jewish institutions are the cornerstones of our Jewish future. We will get through this. We will be better on the other side. The anti-Semites will be pushed back under their rocks, back to the hidden margins of society. It will happen, but it's going to take time. And along the way, though, we will continue to celebrate our lives. We'll continue to embrace those who join our community. We will live our Judaism. And we will lovingly embrace one another. We will continue to seek out allies and support those allies. And we will, on the other side of this time, and there will be one, we will celebrate what we've learned, we'll celebrate how we've grown, and we'll celebrate how much stronger we've become. Amen.